Hey family, Ron Spears here with GrownManStyle. One of the highlights of my life so far was participating in an African Rites of Passage Academy for boys at my church in Detroit. Each Saturday, we would teach these young men life skills and African history and culture. If you've seen me talk about my Keys to Life curriculum and my Sankofa documentary, this was the impetus of it. This is where I first taught. What was unique about our program? We took a different group of boys each year and girls to Africa to participate in a traditional rites of passage ritual with a village we had a relationship with. I've maintained contact with them, and I'm about to interview some of these boys 20 to 25 years later to see just how much of an impact this program had on them. So after the jump, I want to introduce you to Anthony and Jonathan.
Anthony Carnife, and now I'm 37 years old. Live in California, outside of San Francisco area, so the Bay Area, and work in tech. So that was the reason for moving out here and work in the Silicon Valley area. So I was in the program. I think it's a 4-year program, I believe. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I was in there all 4 years. Kind of like balanced that between doing Boy Scouts as well at Hartford. Parents were heavily involved in the church. My dad was a deacon. So yeah, it was just an overall great experience. Probably one of the biggest life-changing experiences I had, just being like super involved in a lot of activities. But that was pretty much like the highlight of being in Kafo. Then after that, when I left Michigan, I went to Morehouse College for 4 years, graduated, had a finance degree, kind of moved around with different companies, lived in Houston for a little bit, went back to Atlanta, recently finished my MBA a year ago at Syracuse University. And then, like I said, once I was finishing that up, wanted to, expand my career in tech and moved out to California. So married now, 2 kids, 5-year old, soon to be 6, and a 2-month-old daughter. So yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Well, hey,
Yeah.
congratulations. I know I congratulated you on Facebook, but
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
congratulations again. I'm, super proud of you. And, I'm trying to think if I wrote a letter of recommendation for you to get
Yeah, I
into
think you
Morehouse.
did. I think you
I
did.
think I
Yep. Yeah,
did
you
too.
did.
So
Yeah.
warms my heart, brother.
Yeah.
Warms my
Yeah.
heart in many ways.
My full name is Reverend Jonathan Betts Fields. I was in CAFO from 10 years old, I believe, to 13.
Hmm.
Went through all 4 years. Went to Senegal and the Gambia in, math. I want to say it was 1996, maybe.
Maybe.
That was, yeah. So that was
Let's just
actually the
say
year I
mid
went to
90s. Hmm.
There we go. Perfect. Um, So was 13 then. I'm currently 38. I am back in Detroit after receiving my grad degree, teaching English and working at Hartford. Spent a lot of time traveling internationally as well. So it was great to have a anchor in the motherland at an early age. Like to have that experience for me was phenomenal. Of course, camps were fun, but the trip to Africa changed my life, as well as the different classes on Christian history, African American history, worship practices, all that other good stuff. I I actually have conversations often with other Hartford young adults, trying to determine like what piece really helped to push me closer to the Black liberation theology, to have a complete understanding of my racial identity development, and for that identity to have been accomplished before I went to, or that the beginning work of that to have been accomplished before I went to college and even before I became a teenager.
Hmm.
Um, que más?
Well, you can go ahead and
There's
say that school that you went to, because Cornife already mentioned Morehouse, and I love that. But you go ahead and mention the other Mecca too. Go ahead.
That's real. Definitely got to
The
represent
two
Howard
HUs that
University.
you representing.
That too, definitely. Graduated from Howard in 2004 with my bachelor in English, minor in computer science. Um, Actually went and taught English in Korea after doing some stuff for the State Department. So kind of connecting that international travel thing, and then received my Master of Divinity from Harvard Divinity School in 2015.
Awesome, awesome. Congratulations.
Congrats,
So,
man.
so now we're going to kind of talk a little bit about the Kafo program itself. We're going to get into the Africa trip in a little bit, but right now the Saturday classes, and want to kind of get some memories from you from those about those classes, and because I have this life skills curriculum that I was using back then that I've actually turned into a virtual master class of about life. And so
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I'm thinking. What are some of your fondest memories from the curriculum materials on those Saturday mornings?
Yeah. I would say for me, like you said, it's hard to remember the details. And I was like trying to think today, like, man, what like everything that we learned, because it was like just so much knowledge. But I know for me personally, it was just like growing up like in a predominantly white community, going to a predominantly white school my entire life, never seeing any black African or black African American teachers or professors, and just having like a small group of students out of maybe like 300 high school students and only 10. Like for me, CAFO was such an impact because it was the first time that like I really understood and like learned about my history.
Mm-hmm.
Like I never knew anything about history in Africa or what our people went through, or just, I mean, I didn't even know anything about like Senegal, Gambia, the door. I mean, the whole thing, even to this day, like I can still quote like, on my journey for truth, I became Kafo on my quest for salvation. Christ set me free as I seek manhood. Kafo nurtures my intellect. Like I still can like quote that from the beginning to the end. And still sometimes I have to go back and reflect on that as like the word of truth and like what I stand for and what I'm about. And so for me, going through this, having that connection and actually seeing like black leadership, like seeing you and seeing Mr. Lumpkin, just like seeing that every single day outside of just like my dad was just like amazing and groundbreaking for me to have that type of leadership and to be able to connect with other African American males that were young boys at the time going through a lot of the same things I was going through,
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't see going to school day in and day out. So I would say like that was really big for me and like really kept me grounded. And even like now to this day, I fast forward, I'm like, I can't wait till my son gets old enough so I can take him back to the door of no return. So I can start teaching him some of those things. So I would say that's my piece on that.
Awesome. Thanks, Anthony.
Yeah.
Jonathan?
Attending a funeral. I remember it took place on a Saturday morning. We went in as a group, and then we had a conversation about it afterwards. Like that was amazingly impactful.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I think was the most impactful was having a group of men, yes, in leadership, yes, hands-on, yes, strict and expecting high standards as far as academics and behavior and dress, yes, fun. Like I believe that was the biggest takeaway for me from CAFO. Not
Mm-hmm.
specific lessons, but also understanding that learning about our faith and learning about our history was incredibly important.
Yeah, I tell people all the time because, just like you guys sit back and reflect, I sit back and reflect on the difference that I have made. And you know what I actually tell people I had so much enthusiasm for teaching, and it's easy to think that what you're teaching is the biggest impact, but the biggest impact is just my physical presence there on a consistent basis and showing care and genuine care and concern. And so that just sort of, not that what you teach is not important, but the example that you set is just as important. So now let's kind of talk about the trip to Africa. Of course, you already mentioned Goree Island, the door of no return. And then, of course, being in the motherland and and then, as it relates to the actual rites of passage ritual, of course, we can't share what goes on in the bush, but what I typically tell people is just lessons about life, respecting elders, respecting, women, and being independent. So I just sort of keep it sort of high level, but I'm just more interested in you guys' memories from the trip to Africa, including Goree Island and the bush experience, and then just the cultural exchange. So you want to go first this time, JB?
there's so many experiences I remember. I remember being were we in Senegal in the city, and then Pinion
Dakar.
Village is in. Okay, that's
We
what's up.
always started out in Dakar, Senegal.
Wonderful. So I remember being in Dakar, staying at the hotel, looking out of the window, like in the hallway randomly. I remember having a hamburger with a fried egg on it and fries with mayonnaise. I thought that was the weirdest thing ever. um, Little did I know that more was coming. But, just again, like this, everything was so amazing, but it also seemed like it was such a grand scale. Like I remember us being on the Kafo trip and there being at least 2 other trips that will come together at certain times and then go to different destinations. So different folk coming from Hartford. I remember going to the village, that first meal, eating communally and thinking that I found a piece of beef in the chicken and rice because it was like the liver or something. So yeah, oh my gosh. I also remember one thing that happened in the bush that wasn't necessarily programmatic that really caught my attention and has stayed with me, interestingly, was the way that the boys from the village repurposed and reused our Capri Sun pouches. We were very considerate, like, okay, we're going to have our trash over here, yada, yada. I remember them going in the box and like, oh, we can open it up and do this with that. And I think that helped me to pay attention more to the details of the parade as we emerged from the bush, like remembering bottle caps being on clothes and in hands and just like that percussive piece. I also remember the feeling of just family, like even before I received my African name, just I've heard stories of people who have visited Africa and had not had a good experience. So it was amazing to have had that experience in the city, in the village, and then also at Goree Island. I remember trading a pair of shoes for a mask. So like having that bartering and playfulness, that experience, that was great. And Goree Island, like that's almost a moment that's stuck in like amber. Just thinking of the silence of the place, the chapel upstairs. My mother even has some pictures that were taken that day. So it's like being able to relive that is just amazing. The other thing I remember is that there were just 2 of us that went. And I really felt that it was kind of like the end of an era. I was like, wow, this Kafo thing has been amazing. And I've been here 4 years. My brother was there for 2. But just being really concerned about the future of it. Like, is anybody else going to experience this? My best friend, he and I came into Kafo together. He ended up not finishing the program with us. So, So all of those experiential things, and then this really big emotional thing too. Like, wow, it's been so helpful. Will it be here next year?
Sure. Anthony?
I think for me, and to piggyback off a lot of the same things, I think like for me, it was one, I remember my entire family went. So my mom went, both of my brothers went, my dad went. He brought the tent, just being involved with like Boy Scouts. And I remember just getting there and just being like, and now that I fast forward today and I look at like when people go to Africa, it's like, oh, I go to South Africa, I went on this like safari. It's like nothing can top like what we experienced and went through. Like it is hands down the greatest experience that I've ever been through. And I just remember every detail from, some of the kids in the village, like asking us for certain things. I remember we bought like different meals and dry foods that we can hand out to them and toys. And I remember them still to this day, like running behind the bus, like handing them certain things. I remember like when we were like meeting our families for the first time, just like, here we are, just like coming from America, going into their village. They know nothing about us, and like how excited and welcoming they were to like bring us in and get us prepared to like for that. And for me, the biggest part was like that march to the bush. Like I still try to like remember each piece, like walking through the heat, the music was playing, just hearing that today, just trying to like relive those experiences and the emotions that we felt. I remember exchanging like addresses to send stuff back, and then the thing too was just like the level of respect. Like, I mean, I grew up with just like respect your elders, but this was like a whole different level of respect that they have for the elders. Like, it was just like times 10, and just a lot of the things we did in the bush and how we ate and how we just came together as a family. Um, I don't know, it just like gets me emotional because like I don't like how would I ever go through that same process again? And like I said, now having a son, I'm just like, man, he's gonna miss out not being able to have like an experience like Kafo Academy.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
so yeah, so that's kind of like a lot of emotions that I have from it. So
As you look back on your learning stage in life, I know we all three of us are in the working stage right now, but when you look back, what would you say would be the maybe the 2 or 3 best choices that you made, and then maybe a circumstance or two that you had to overcome? So Anthony, you want to start with that?
yeah, I would say
That has contributed to your current quality of life.
right. I would say it's kind of interesting you mentioned that. I would say like being such a young boy at the time and then seeing someone like you, because I know at that time you were like very young. I don't even think you were married at that time yet, Mr. Spears. I
Correct.
know you guys were like dating, you and Mrs. Spears. I know you guys like live right beside the church, and
Mm-hmm.
but I think the biggest thing for me was just having like Black role models and examples outside of my dad, and
Mm-hmm.
like seeing that, because then from there it was just like, man, like Mr. Spears went to Morehouse. That's a connection. Like I want to go to Morehouse. I want to like live that experience and go through that. So went to Morehouse, and then had a great experience. Like had Kafo behind me. You're on like cloud 10, and then boom, corporate America hits, and like they know nothing about Morehouse. You explain Kafo, they're like, and that's when it like really hit me. Like I'm in Houston, Texas, working for an oil company, like good old boy network. And then for me, like I would have to like go back to those times and like really rehash in my mind, like this is what I learned from Kafo. Like this was my foundation. Like be strong, like step up, go back and help any young boy. So I was like very big on like even when I was working, like going back to Morehouse, recruiting young men, because it's like I have to continue. Like if there's no Kafo, I have to continuously like pay this forward, like keep driving. And I see sometimes the disconnect where I see like other African American males that didn't have that experience, and it's almost like once they hit like a certain level of success, it's like I'm done. Like I've made it. I've done my own thing. I live in the suburbs now. I have my big house. I work in corporate America. Like boom, check, check, check. Like, and for me, having Kafo, I still look at, okay, what ways can I still help and drive that same motivation, that same drive, be an example, encourage another African American boy. So that to me is like really how the program really has impacted me after.
Okay, awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
JB?
Definitely. Yeah, I would say the same. Having that community of men of faith, Black men, um, and knowing that I would see them regularly. Like
Mm-hmm.
even when CAP was over, going to church in community.
Mm-hmm.
After graduating and coming back to Detroit, like spending time with you, Ron, just in the
Mm-hmm.
basement kicking, all the poetry stuff as well.
Yep.
I would also list getting to know myself as a creative,
Mm-hmm.
and like knowing that I loved writing poetry growing up, but not really super excited about becoming a poetry writer only immediately after college. So
Mm-hmm.
that kind of like career discernment and career planning process. Also uh, mm, the unfortunate process of truly experiencing the roots of racism in this country, like going to a Black college, going to a Black high school, being from a Black city. There were ways that as I got older, the racism became more overt or more hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
And even through grad school. So I'm grateful for, like a group of men who actually aren't all connected to CAFO, who I'm able to like kind of connect with still because of that. But
Sure. How do you guys define quality of life at this stage in your life? That's the question I wanna know. Anthony, how do you define quality? What does quality of life mean to you? at this age in your life?
I would say quality of life. I think for a while, I think, I never really got into the whole drugs and alcohol. I mean, like I would say like my teenage years was pretty like cookie cutter and standard.
Hmm.
And I think I lost track of that and it wasn't any of that. It was different challenges like trying to fit into corporate America, trying to move up the totem pole. Like I got to go to grad school right away to make six figures. And so you don't like, that's something I don't think you're necessarily like taught. And obviously at 13, you're not thinking, oh, when I graduate, how's corporate America? But I think I got caught up into just a rat race and real like I got to start my business now, like always just chasing and never stepping back and saying, wow, God has blessed me. Let me step back and like smell the roses. Let me readjust my mindset and how I think about what is success. Because then once I graduated from grad school and moved to Silicon Valley and like by the resume, it looks wonderful. It's just like, yeah, like like I guess it sounds good.
Hmm.
But for me, like quality of life is like, wow, I'm out here, but like really like seeing my kid, like instilling like those same principles and same values in my kids. Like, making sure like I'm living a faithful, dedicated life with my wife and like building that up and like raising our kids the right way, like following God, listening to how he's leading my life and saying, hey, you want to do X, Y, and Z over there. Take a step back. Like, let me give you the answers. Let me help guide that. So I think for me, that was like some of the challenges that I went through and I had to like level set. And even like to this day, like I said, like I still have to like say the Kafo like words through my head, like look at what I went through in Africa, look at how my dad raised me, look at leaders like you, because that to me was just like, and you said it, and I guess I keep saying the same thing, but like showing up is just so key and so valuable. Like just seeing that and having that really impacted me. So for me, it was just like for instance, like we just had a meeting and I stepped up and I brought to the CEO, I said, hey, you're talking about Black Lives Matter, but when you have 300 employees and only 20 Black people and no Black interns, like we got a problem. And so for me, like I was able to step up because I've seen this and I'm like, hey, you're all about this now. Let's start getting some Black interns in there. Like,
Absolutely.
let's start changing the dialogue and the conversation. Hey, you can post about it on LinkedIn all day long, but like, let's start doing some game. So for me, that defines success. If I start seeing some Black interns in Silicon Valley at this company, that's success. If I start seeing my son, he's in a school where it's predominantly Asian and Indian, and he's like, hey, I got to give back. I got to understand my history, what I'm about. That's success. So for me, it's just changed over the years. So
Awesome. Awesome.
yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
JB?
Yeah. How do I measure success? Wow. Couple of ways. So the scripture came to mind: "Be still and know that I am God. That I will be exalted among the earth." And like that, strangely enough, leads me to this idea of vacations and Sabbath and being able to take a break and to know that I can't work 7 days out of the week. Like that's the base level. 7 days out of the week, it's impossible. I have to have at least one day or a half a day where I'm relaxing, where I'm not checking emails, where I can allow the wisdom of rest to kind of fill my body. And understanding also not only how important it is in 1 month, in one week, but also retreats or trips wherever, just to kind of reconnect in different ways. That's one. Two, the availability of options and the chance to actually have my choice in the say. So growing up, like as far as what I wanted to do in college, there was no specific answer. I
Mhm.
thought I was going to be computer science. I changed to English and put that as my minor. Right before school, I was thinking, I was thinking of less options than other people were presenting me with. I
Mhm.
remember one person said like, "Oh yeah, you're going to school and you're going to study accounting." I'm like, me, accounting? But to not even have that on the plate as an option um, made it a little more interesting on the other end. I mean, what do I really do with an English degree other than go back to school, as my sister tried to get me to understand?
Right.
Um,
Your sister who's a
Also,
doctor, right?
exactly, yeah, who kept going back and kept going back.
Right. Right.
um, I also consider success to be the amount of lives that I can touch. So, working at a charter school in downtown Detroit where we have kids from a number of different communities, a number of different family systems, and being able to not only teach English, but to teach, life coping skills, to have conversations with them and, to bring them up in ways that we can converse as a group and not just have a bunch of small conversations. So those possibilities to just, whether it's in hey, I'm going to see this student every day. Hey, I'm going to see this kid at church every week. Hey, I'm going to see them once a month. Or even just, I'm at this random event and I'm a youth pastor and there's a kid at my table. Like knowing that kids usually don't have as much attention or engagement with other people at events like that. It's, that's one of the things I'm like, oh, I'm here for a reason. It's not just, oh, let me interact with the adults, but let me always be mindful of youth. I think also the ability to imagine and to dream, like again, bringing that creative practice in, but being able to say, okay, I'm at this job now and everything's going great, but what if I had to move home? Or what if I don't want to be a teacher anymore? What are the different opportunities? What would I be okay with? What would I do just in order to have it done? The last thing I'm going to say is the ability to balance life with other, and by balance life, I'm saying like balance work and life. Mm-hmm. So personally, there's so many times I look back like, wow, I could have been making so much more money, especially if I stayed in computer science. But understanding that it's a blessing for me to have had a moment in college to say, hey, what will bring me fulfillment? To have a frat brother to say, yo, don't just start looking for jobs, but start doing these things that you enjoy doing. You like writing, great. You like music, great. Why don't you write for the local paper about music? So, like having those people in my life and being able to be that person in somebody else's life.
Sure. Well, where do you, we'll start with you, Anthony. Where do you see yourself in 20 years from now? Where do you see yourself?
Man, that's tough. 20 years from now, I would say.
When you're my age, I'm 50 now, so just imagine yourself being 50.
Yeah. I would say like kids doing what they have to do, really understanding like what we value as a family, making sure that I'm always just pushing it forward. Cause like I remember like one of my first internships out of college was actually another Morehouse guy, and he was big up and brought me in, and it was just always the same thing. It was just like, keep pushing it forward, whatever you do. And it's not jobs, it's just, hey, conversation, what's going on in your life. And I try to do that now with some of, young guys that I know that's considering getting married or having kids, and just like chopping it up and having a conversation. So that's definitely like a success level for me as I start to have more time now that I have like such kids that are so young.
Right.
And just always like balancing. I think Jonathan mentioned that. It's just like balancing my personal and my work life and making sure that I always have like a good balance, not, fun all the time, which is not really me, but just not so focused on career that I forget like what takes place at home. Cause I see that so many times. It's like either sometimes African-American boys, they don't have a dad around, or their dad is so focused on his career that he is not even like fully engaged and just like, just letting things just like go by the wayside. And I think for me, like that's important. And then just looking up to like leaders. Like, I mean, even you, Mr. Spears, like I look at what you're doing with your kids, how you and Miss Spears, like I was like, damn, like they're still married. Like, like that's motivating. Cause like, I don't even like, I mean, my parents got divorced. Like, I don't even know like a lot of families that are still together. So seeing you guys, I'm like, man, she taught, he was teaching at the same time, young family, like moving up, keeping it forward. Like, let me keep doing the same thing. Like, let me push it forward. And with that comes, you got to balance. You got to balance life. You're going to come up against some challenges. I mean, I've lost jobs, been laid off, and, just all the things that like come with life in general. Just how do you bounce back? How do you react? How do you keep growing and pushing? Is just, to me, how I see myself and what I define success when I get to that age.
Awesome. JB, when you my age,
Man, that is a great question. A great
JB at
question.
50.
Whew. The first thing that came to mind is community work. Like definitely continuing my commitment to the community. Definitely still a part of the church, but whether it's Hartford or somewhere else, I always try to figure out where I will be living, and I don't know that yet. So I just leave that out of the equation. I imagine I might be celebrating a high school graduate or close to a high school graduate about that time, knowing that I am not dating and nowhere close to having kids yet, but definitely wishful thinking, definitely.
Understand?
I also want to say like strengthening my legacy. Like I realize that there are things that I learned from my parents that every Black family doesn't know. And there are things that I didn't learn from my parents that every Black family should know. So doing my best to kind of teach what I think is important, what has brought me joy in life and success, and kind of making it a little more formal, whether it's like putting more of my life energy into something like Kafo or into multiple organizations for kids of color, kids not of color. So yeah, and I also feel like this fatherhood, this communal fatherhood piece might become a little stronger too. I don't know exactly what that looks like if I'll still be youth pastor at that time. I do see at least one more degree happening. Yeah.
Last thing I wanted to pick you guys' brains about is, I told Anthony I've started a lifestyle blog called GrownManStyle. Anthony, what does GrownManStyle, just those words, mean to you? When you think of GrownManStyle, what comes to mind?
I think GrownManStyle to me is like a stand-up guy in the public or behind closed doors. I would say probably like behind closed, like how he treats his family, how he respects his wife, his kids, his relationship with God, well-traveled, having his kids explore different cultures, different experiences, which I think has a family become very well-rounded. And I just say like those are probably like my key things. It's really just family, relationship with God, how you carry yourself, how you present yourself, always looking a person in the eye when you shake your hand, being able to communicate, express how you feel. And I think that's another one too, is I think sometimes with like, especially males in general, whatever race, they have a hard time expressing their emotions. And I sometimes probably wear my emotions too much on my sleeve, but being able to just really be able to cry, open up, express how you feel, what's going on. Cause I think that really like is like grown man like lifestyle.
Awesome.
GrownManStyle then would be balance in all areas, not only work-life balance, but also balance between giving time to your family and giving time to your community. Also balance between emotions, between being a person of integrity, but also having emotional intelligence. So like that truth and love piece, and expressing yourself, portraying yourself, dressing in a way, conducting business in a way where it's not about competition, but it's about community. It's always about excellence, but not necessarily about teaching someone a lesson or being better than someone.